One of the reasons why we haven't shared this is because the path has been arduous and bumpy, and we've been in our own chrysalis of understanding what this looks like, how it could be.
I had a little bit of hesitancy about this podcast just because it's exposing the most vulnerable part of my journey.
But I am here with my beloved wife, Vylana, and we're also here with beloved Alana, who is a part of our relationship constellation and shares a deep love with both myself and Vylana. And we're also here with my beloved and esteemed teacher, Rebbe, Dr. Marc Gafni, who's helped us navigate what this all means, how we're going to not only live in this moment to moment, but to create something that is pointing towards one possibility in the future of relationships.
It's beyond complex. Can we make it through this?
There's nothing more whole than a broken heart.
Maybe we can't go backwards. Now, what does it look like to go forwards?
I never viewed it as my job to make this work.
This is not prescriptive. And I can also hypothesize an evolution of consciousness, a new story.
Places within all of us, I think, that we've had to die to, or ideas or expectations, and really just knowing that, we're moving through this together, and this is actually something that is forging a deeper bond within all of us.
We've given this a name. We're calling it radical monogamy in the field of erotic mystics. Lifelong, committed relationship, but not in the classical monogamous sense. It's an expanded monogamy of deep exclusivity between Aubrey and Vi. And then there's going to be a new goddess who will step into the field.
For me in my life journey, it has never brought me to anywhere but the most liberated, beautiful, beyond what I could possibly imagine. If I had 1,000,000 hours to think that this would be where I would have been guided to, from just listening to the whispers, not submitting to the fears that can feel so real and can be so validated.
So many times, when we're in conflict, you're there for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
You're such a stand for our relationship. You have shown over and over and over, you're not here to take anything from me.
So worth it to forge and attune what truth feels like in your body and to you, and to create a relationship with truth.
Can I trust my deepest heart's desire? And can I clarify that desire? And if I can't clarify it, I shouldn't do it.
The hardest and most radically beautiful and majestic path that I've ever walked, and it's not an easy one.
All three of you have shown purity. You've all been exceedingly complex and a huge pain in the ass.
Through all of those moments, our love deepens and roots. It's our love is like an oak tree, and those roots are so deep down into the earth. We know the insides of each other.
If you're in this type of construct, you have to be willing to put your money where your mouth is, proverbially in the erotic jealousy arena. Because both Alana and Vylana have had lovers while we're in this construct.
There's actually this interesting place where it's deepened our relationship, radical commitment and total freedom.
The idea that there are many possibilities, and if you stay with truth and with love and with honesty, grace, compassion, and compersion, you really care for each other, there's possibilities that can develop, and I think that's where we find ourselves now. Well, buckle your seatbelts, everyone, because this is going to be a podcast that is going to be shocking for some of y'all. It's going to be stimulating for many of y'all. It's going to raise a lot of questions. And the reason is that I am here with my beloved wife, Vylana, which many of you who follow me on social media or have listened to our podcasts have met and love. And we're also here with beloved Alana, who is a part of our relationship constellation and shares a deep love with both myself and Vylana in their own unique qualities. And we're also here with my beloved and esteemed teacher, Rebbe, Dr. Marc Gafni, who's helped us navigate what this all means, how we're going to not only live in this moment to moment, but to create something that is pointing towards one possibility in the future of relationships. relationships that, as we know, if you look at the statistics, there's staggering percentages of infidelity. There's staggering and disappointing numbers that come from statistics and studies about the decline of eros inside relationship containers. And so people are looking for different options. What are they? Do they work? Is it possible? And for some people, the traditional models, monogamy as it has been for thousands of years, just works perfectly. And so we're not here to be advocates of our way, but we're here to just humbly tell the story of our way. And the reality is that we didn't plan to be here. This was not like we set out with this intention. We arrived at this intention through a variety of choices and mystical interventions and just the acceptance of what is. And what is has really guided us to where we are now. And where we are now is a story that we have not yet told. And so here we are to tell the story and also tell the story in the context of a world, a planet that's really, as you would say, Rebbe, drenched in shame.
I mean, maybe that's, there's going to be so much to hear from you, Aubrey, and from Vylana and from Alana. So maybe we'll just kind of just set the frame and then, away we go. So first, I think what Aubrey said was so important, which is we're not here to suggest that there's this new optimal form of relationship which we are proselytizing for. Joseph Smith starting Mormonism. Nothing of the kind. So one. Two, for most people, most of the time, classical monogamy, and I say classical monogamy, is probably the best road and not a simple one. Because actually in this kind of classical monogamy vision, everyone envisions classical monogamy as this, perfect man and woman, first off, right? Heteronormative, if we can use that word. There's always a man and a woman. There's 4 perfect kids, incredible grandchildren. There's a philanthropic organization that they're all working in to make the world better. They have insanely beautiful Christmas parties and Thanksgiving. They all love each other.
Or at least pictures that look insanely
right?
beautiful that they send you.
Unimaginably, of just like this bliss and harmony, and you can just see the picture of all of them, and everything else is somehow reaching for that. Now, Donny Osmond might have made that happen in Salt Lake City, or may not have. That's a question. But that's not actually how it works. Classical monogamy, which again, I think is probably the best path for most people most of the time, is filled with holy and broken hallelujahs. And the reason why Leonard Cohen's song Hallelujah has more covers made of it than any other story is because it's about, wow, love is not a victory march, right? It's a cold and it's a broken, it's a holy and broken hallelujah, right? Meaning it's not simple. There's agony, there's ecstasy, there's pain, there's abandonment, there's trauma. So monogamy itself is a beautiful and gorgeous journey, which works for many people or doesn't, but it's a gorgeous, sacred possibility, which should be at the center of culture. Beautiful, we got that. And it's a critical and. Historically, what's happened is the way monogamy has been lived is through deception. There's actually a series of deceptions that are always at play. So, for example, right now it's about 60 to 70% in classical monogamies of people who are having sexuality of some kind that violates the agreement outside of the monogamous container. And there's a range of what that means. Does that mean cheating of this kind? Does it mean pornographic play? Does it mean emotion? Whatever it means. But basically 60 to 7% of people color outside of the lines without telling anyone, which means that there's a fundamental lack of safety in the container because there's a fundamental deception at play, which is hidden every day. And it takes an enormous amount of energy to keep hiding it because you got to keep hiding it every day. You got to keep making sure it's not discovered. And then, of course, you know about it, so you feel shamed. And your essential shame is this experience that if everybody really knew what was going on, If they really knew where my mind, heart, and body were playing, whether in the palace of the real or the palace of the imagination, they wouldn't actually love me or honor me the way they do. So therefore, I feel like a fraud. So there's an imposter phenomena. You have a place where 65 to 70% of the population of the classical, let's say, Western world for now, but it's true also in the Eastern blocs, actually live in shame, an essential fundamental shame, which means that we have to actually begin to deepen, because a planet drenched in shame, which is the experience, not that I did something wrong, but I am wrong, right? Not that I made a mistake, I am a mistake, right? Is a devastating planet. That's a planet which becomes rife with war, starvation, abuse. So that's part one. That's just kind of frame one. Just have that frame. Let's just throw one more frame and then open it up, and we'll weave as we go. But one more kind of critical frame, which is crazy important. Reality is, as we've talked about so much, reality is evolution. That's just true. Evolution means it's a story. It's an evolving story, and it's a love story. Right? Reality is not merely a fact, it's a story and it's a love story. Two is reality is relationships. That's just true. Atoms are relationships. Molecules are relationships between parts. So reality is evolution, reality is relationships, and reality is the evolution of relationships. Reality is, at its core structure, the evolution of relationships. And what moves reality forward from the molecular to the world of animals, of life, to the world of humans, is crisis. Every crisis is always a crisis of relationship. It's never not. So every crisis is a crisis of intimacy. You solve a crisis of intimacy by actually reaching for a next and new structure of intimacy. Reality is the progressive deepening of intimacies. So when we run into a crisis of relationship, okay, so monogamy, right, classically, it's not exactly working. So what do? So we move to serial monogamy. Oh, it's the right structure, but didn't work with that person. The problem was the person. Let me try it another time. Didn't work. Let me try it again. Let me try it again. So we move from monogamy to serial monogamy, meaning we're not willing to actually configure a new structure of intimacy publicly. Privately, we're doing it all the time, and no one's willing to admit it. So therefore, we generate a planet drenched in shame. It's like, right? So what we need to do is we need to participate in the evolution of relationship, not to make something better than monogamy. No, monogamy should be deepened. It's a deep and beautiful and holy journey. It's a holy and broken hallelujah, absolutely. But it's not the only journey. There are other journeys that are sacred and beautiful and need to be held with integrity. And maybe the last piece, I just want to honor all three of you. You know, Alana, Vylana, Aubrey, I'm crazy proud of you, because all three of you have said, we want to live with integrity. We want to live without deception. We want to live without artifice. We want to live without cheating, without lying. We want to live in a full, profound authenticity and grace. And we want to do it not just for ourselves. We want to do it for the sake of the evolution of love. Not to proselytize, but to model wider possibilities of intimacy so that people can begin to find their own unique configurations of intimacy, not to imitate yours, but to find their own. And all three of you have been through 1,000 hours of journey, and holy and broken hallelujahs, have been madly committed to living with integrity and with kind of a radical authenticity and open, radical open hearts. So like, oh my God, just crazy proud of you. And away we go.
Away we go.
Away we go.
I'm going to start the story, and then I'm going to move to all of these stories. We'll keep a semblance of chronology here as we kind of tell the story. And the story really begins with me recognizing fundamentally that I was unwilling to actually be in deception. And that I had a thriving wild stallion of Eros that desired, different experiences, different connections. So I'm in around 2013, I'm coupled with my partner at the time, Whitney Miller. And I'm starting to rise as the CEO of On It. I'm starting to get a platform. I'm starting to network with a lot of influential people and athletes. And I see that the majority of the men, which were mostly my friends, but also some of the women that I knew, were unfaithful. There was so many of them, not all of them, but so many of them were. And they would tell the stories of the stress that they would hold in their body, breaking out as psoriasis, breaking out as all of these neurological conditions to physiological conditions, and the stress of worried about whether they'd been caught so not only is it the selfish desire not to have to bear that burden, which I simply couldn't. I have a tendency towards far too much neurosis and also too deep a commitment to God. Every time I'm in a plant medicine journey, Mother Ayahuasca sits me down and lets me know every place that I've been out of integrity. So it was not a possibility. So then I sat down with Whitney and I said, hey, Whitney, I love you, but I don't think I can do this monogamy thing. I want to try polyamory. And she was like, fuck off. I have no interest. And I was like, damn. All right, well, this path is true to me. And I want you to know it's totally fair. As no special rights or privileges for me that are not granted to you. This is what I'm proposing. She's like, still, fuck off. And we separated for a few months. And I found a lover. And then we eventually got back together. And then we tried to make it work. And this journey was very public during those times. And I learned a lot. Learned a lot about jealousy. I learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work. But through this whole process, I was always honest. There was nothing that I ever did that wasn't in the clear light of day. And despite the conflict and the challenges that arose, it was honest. And I could live with that. And, there were other challenges, but there was something that was at peace in my heart.
Yeah.
And I felt comfortable there. And that's during that period that I met Vylana. And Vylana, I'm with Whitney and I'm starting to dance with Vylana. And she's like, what the hell are you doing, bro? That's your girlfriend over there. We were at Burning Man. She didn't get it. And then we sat down in the RV and I explained, no, this is a different construct. It's called polyamory. Everything we're doing is blessed in the arrangement that we have. And, I kind of let her know without being too overt at that moment that I was quite interested. And she was also like, hey, fuck off. I'm not interested in being one of your girlfriends. I got main character energy. I got main chick energy here. So I was like, damn, that's a bummer. And we've talked about this a little bit, but I was faced with this. I had a vision well, if I got rid of everybody else, then potentially I could accelerate the possibility of being with Vylana because I felt this really strong urge and attraction and had mystical signs that came in, actually. We had an intimate encounter and a white star of light came in my third eye. And it was open-eyed, closed-eyed vision. I wasn't on any medicine. And it was like God put an asterisk in this moment. And I was like, fuck. And then she coupled with somebody else. And I just remained friends with her and carried on with my polyamory journey. And eventually she uncoupled. And at the point that she uncoupled, then this was this huge kind of unkinking of a hose. And I was like, I'm all in. It took me a couple weeks to propose after we gave some time and space for the uncoupling and respected the boundaries of that. But we moved really, really fast. And, part of that covenant was, hey, I'm still going to be interested in some sexual experiences. We'll do them together. But it was largely under the auspices of monogamy with some exceptions. And Vi was exploring her comfortability with those. And she'd had some experiences with, multiple partners and had a little bit of that. And so she was cautiously open, I would say. I don't know if that would be fair, but cautiously open. But it was kind of on the table. But it was an idea of pretty much classical monogamy with a little bit of play, right? So then we start off and it's this wild and passionate love affair, of course, bringing things up for us as we've made this leap of commitment and got married by Elvis, and so much love and passion and so much beauty that's come in. And we start the process of exploring. And that exploring, certainly brought up a lot of different things for you. And I'd love for you now to pass it over for you to start telling the story here from your perspective, because particularly, as Marc was saying, you had never really experienced a relationship that was in truth and integrity all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so go through kind of what those early days were like, leading up, of course, to the moment where Alana enters the scene. And then we'll hear Alana's story that'll bring us up to present. And we'll kind of tell the story, the most interesting part of the story of how we figured out what this was and what Spirit was trying to communicate to us.
Yeah. So, I don't want to get too far into my history, but my history was the 70% of deception and shame and lying and betrayal. So my, physical body has had a whole lifetime of a lot of trauma around that particular, like a lot of things in relationship, like there being something that was hidden. Right. There was always something that was hidden, like I would feel like this was a beautiful relationship and we're deeply in love and all these things. And then there was like something that would just come out of left field and just like totally take my legs out from under me because there was something that was hidden. And so I stepped into our relationship, knowing the sensitivity around like my animal body and my desire at that point to just really desiring to feel a sense of safety. I'd never known safety and stability and in some ways just feeling like radically chosen by somebody. And so entering into it, like that was our agreement. It was, I guess, monogamish, you could call it. We didn't have, Marc here to kind of help walk us through and help us to see alternate, possibilities and also just create the structure that creates, a lot of the safety. And so we were sort of just, trusting in ourselves. And what the journey felt like for me was feeling you in your desire and really wanting to find the place within myself where I could meet you in that desire, not from a place of me like submitting to you, but how can I actually be on the inside with you? And so a lot of those earlier experiences that we had, I mean, our whole relationship has felt like me just pressing edge, like pressing, okay, here's my edge. All right. Okay. Then I'm good here. And then like, okay, here's my next fucking edge. And it's just like a constant pressing forward into really showing me a lot of the places where I've not been free because I've been so driven by fear. I think we have a choice when we're in fear. It's like you can try to control and contain to feel safe, but how alive is that relationship really? And so what I felt like I've always been left with you is like I want you to feel like you can be yourself. I want you to feel like you can be loved in being all of who you are. And that choice and me, willing that choice has meant a lot of shedding and dying for me of like my stories of comparison or competition, or now if you look at them that way, am I not as important? Like that, it's just like all of those things that can arise and just feeling the thing that the person that you love the most placing their attention on something else, like it brings up a lot of stuff. So it's, even our journey in the exploration, like there's been so much beauty, like, and that's what I really carry with me. But it's felt, it's like a diamond that's been constantly forged over and over and over and over through the fire. But the fire is the truth. The fire is this paradox that I'm actually the most safe because there is nothing hiding in the shadows that's left to bite me. And now that doesn't make it easy, and we'll continue to progress through the story. But like, it's been the most difficult initiation of my whole life, like by far, and the most rewarding and the deepest love and the deepest intimacy. And ultimately what I can feel over and over again when I'm in the choosing of this love and the the loving you in the way that you deserve to be loved, because you really love me in that way. I found that through every death, there comes so much freedom, because there's not a lot that I'm afraid of anymore. And I think that, understanding of it's so nuanced and it's so complex. It's like the intimacy and aliveness just gets like wider, which sometimes it's so hard. And sometimes and most of the time it's radically beautiful. But through all of those moments, our love like deepens and roots. It's like our love is like an oak tree, and those roots are so deep down into the earth that like we know the insides of each other. We're honest about everything. We're honest about every desire, any fantasy, any challenge that we have in perspective, like whatever it is. It's like our relationship is so rooted in truth. And that's the life that, I want to live. So that was my experience leading up to Alana making her way into our life. It's been a wild journey, and I've died so many times I can't even count. It's just hundreds and hundreds, but ultimately to kind of like bring us to that point, that's what I'd say.
Even before we get to Alana, which is entering stage left in a second, you said one sentence which I just want to reflect back. It was a passing sentence, but it was so important. You said to Ab, you said, I wanted to meet your desire and to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And then you added a really critical sentence, which was, because you've loved me in that way. And I want to just really just to hear that, right? That actually you're wanting to meet your man in the depth of his desire because you feel he's meeting you in the depth of your desire.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a model of, how can we please the man?
Yeah.
It's how do we please the beloveds,
and it's
who are madly pleased.
Yeah, and it's also not like an equal. Like I haven't had a natural inclination towards desiring other men. That's not really been true for me. So it's also not an equal. Like you give me this, and it's not like
Right.
this. There's a reciprocity of energy in the ways that he loves me is different.
Right.
And I've had to kind of overcome these things in my mind of feeling like this should be equal, because if I give this, and I think that I think a lot of relationships get stuck in that. It's like, what do I get? Which was a frame that was really helpful that, you've offered to me. And I also just want to give the context that, we started working with Marc as our teacher to learn Dharma, and then, found ourselves with you being the main person that we come to whenever we have struggles in our relationship. When Alana came into the picture, like you have been such a necessary anchor to us being able to sit here right now. So in the same way, just really wanting to like honor and recognize, like there's no, I cannot see a way that we could be sitting here right now without you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've all been together. Yeah, just so beautiful. And I know you're about to unfold, and we're going to unfold the next step. I just want to just reflect back that last sentence again. So you made this great distinction, right, Alana, Ab, which was, so it's not that it's like quid pro quo.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We all have this like list, right? I remember when I got bar mitzvah, it's like a lot of bar, not so much mitzvah, but anyways, everyone was getting presents, right? And you got like, these people gave us a $7 present, and these people a $15 present, and my parents had a big list, and you checked off, and then when you went to their bar mitzvah, you had to make sure you gave, the exchange present. So it's not that, right? It's not this kind of quid pro quo. It's that Ab's is pouring into you in 1,000 ways,
Mm-hmm.
and you're pouring into him in 1,000 ways, and they're not always the same ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the phrase, in the reciprocity of energies, in 1,000 different ways of exchanging, there's the sense of deep mutuality and wholeness. Is that fair?
Yeah.
That's integrity.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all have this innate sense that love is the most powerful force in the universe and in our own lives. And yet we only have one word for it. Well, the ancient Greeks had 7. Eros was erotic love. Mania, that obsessive love. pragma, that rational love, storge, that parental love, philia, the brotherly love, philautia, self-love, and agape, universal love. And each of these tones of love have their own characteristics. And I ultimately realized that all of the poetry that was pouring out of my heart came from love. But it was through these different fractals, mediated by these different types of love, that my poetry was actually emerging. So all of that came together in my new book, Love to the Seventh Power. All poetry comes from love. There's wildly erotic poems. There's fierce protective poems. There's divine, fatherly, loving poems to the son that I'm going to have. There are poems with the fierceness of a warrior who is standing for what is good. This is a snapshot into the inner sanctum of my own heart. Everything that I truly feel and have felt, all of the heartaches, all of the triumphs, all of those dark, low moments, all of those vulnerable confessions, all of it is contained and wrapped in verse in this new book. So check it out. You can go to chakaruna.com, chakaruna.com. We have some beautiful golden bookmarks there and signed copies of the book. And also, it's available on Amazon. We have an amazing audiobook recording, and you can buy the book on Amazon there as well, and also an ebook. So for those of you who haven't gotten it already, I hope you guys enjoy my book, Love to the Seventh Power. All poetry comes from love. I think, I want to get to this, the entry of Alana into our story. I'm super eager to get there. I think, one of the things that also prepared me is for, eventually, and we'll get to this part of the story, but there's a lot of men who pretend that they're in a place where they can bless their women to do the same things that they do. And then when it comes down to actually ante up the chips on the table, the hand gets a little shaky, right? And the cards fold. And, Vi, although it hasn't been the richness and depth and love that I've shared with Alana, also had that moment where she had a lovership and she got to watch me, put my chips unflinchingly on the table, actually be her wingman, help her make this connection with someone she was interested, someone I play ball with who I thought, this is a good man. And she got to watch me bless her in this path. And I think that's also important to recognize is it's not these rules are good for me, but not for we, and so while it's not quid pro quo, there's the openness in the space that I think also
there's a profound equality.
There is equality.
Not quid pro quo, but there's a deep equality. There's
fundamental,
a deep mutuality
structural
and
equality.
Respect.
Yeah.
Deep respect of full possibility and love within. And this is just the name we're calling it. And that'll be a perfect time to go to the next. We've given this a name. We're calling it radical monogamy in the field of erotic mystics. So paradoxically, this is not about polyamory. That's the paradox. It's actually about radical monogamy, meaning deep, exclusive, lifelong, committed relationship, right? But not in the classical monogamous sense. It's an expanded monogamy. But there's a radical monogamy, but it's just not a monogamy of two. It's a slightly bigger monogamy, but it's not, okay, we're not like moving in and out of partners. No, it's not the polyamory road. It's not the classical monogamy mode. It's a radical monogamy of deep exclusivity between Aubrey and Vi. And then there's going to be a new goddess who will step into the field, who will also step into this field of radical monogamy in the field of erotic mystics. So it's a very deep structure. I'm just remembering a person right now. And if you all remember, Aubrey, this is dating ourselves. I'm a little older than you, but there was in the Vietnam War, there's a man named Daniel Ellsberg who challenged the war and he did the Pentagon Papers. It was the big explosion in the 60s. So Daniel was actually in this exact configuration in his life, relationally. And I knew his sister-in-law, Barbara Marks Hubbard, very well, and his wife then, Patricia Ellsberg. And, Daniel and I met with him. We sat and chatted before he died. And had he not had this configuration, he said he couldn't have done anything. He couldn't have stood in integrity. He couldn't have been in his aliveness. Mm-hmm. He couldn't have had fought the battles that needed to be fought, because he would have been so empty, right? So in deception that he would have lost his connection with his full value and ethos.
Yeah.
So I just remember Daniel just comes to mind, and I can think of 10 other people, off the top of my head who are in different configurations. Our friend Paul Chek is in a kind of, right, post-classical configuration. And there's a wonderful book by Rofi called Uncommon Arrangements. And it's about the greatest people in history, 8 stories, all of which what she calls uncommon arrangements. And when we allow for uncommon arrangements, something beautiful emerges. We don't make it classical. We don't proselytize. We say, but something beautiful wants to emerge. And here in this place, something beautiful has emerged.
Yeah, I think even Carl Jung had an uncommon arrangement.
He was getting really uncommon. That's
too uncommon.
He was
Too
getting
uncommon.
a little
Too uncommon. We'll
He's
go
getting
from there.
really uncommon.
All right, so let's. Okay.
I would love to. Sorry to interrupt. I would love to be able to speak to that, because for me, in my experience in my lovership, there was such a depth and a richness to it, and so much perspective, and I couldn't move forward. I know this is like interrupting the conversation, but I just wanted to sort of land that, because that felt really true. But like there was a really deep depth and richness that I would love to, bring a lot of love and light to, and
Yeah.
yeah.
For sure. And that's a part of it. It's a part of this love that it isn't ephemeral in this way that it just disappears. When you form these connections, if it's true, as Paul Selig says, what is true is always true. In the love that you feel, it doesn't go away. It's there. And so I think it's beautiful that, you took that moment in your own integrity to say, yeah, that love was there, and it was real and
rich.
And rich.
And it remains.
Yeah.
Meaning there's a depth of love. The love doesn't, right? You say it beautifully, Aubrey. We think that when this relational contact is over, love's over, change the locks. The locks on my heart, we change. Or we close our hearts. And what Ob says and what you're stepping into is so crazy beautiful. Right? The relationship structure that you were in particularly might be over, but you haven't closed the lock of your heart.
No.
You're still loving. You're still honoring. And that's forever. That's forever.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful.
All right. So Vi and I are in Miami. We've made it through some trials and tribulations of, having a lot of fun with different loverships and different experiences, and all of them had kind of gone in different separate directions, and we'd had so much fun. Although there was challenges, we'd had so much fun. Both of us were like, we're here in Miami for a month. We're going to look around. We're going to see if we can find anybody here in Miami. And it was coming towards the end of the trip. And I go downstairs to a beautiful gym there called Anatomy. I'm down in the gym. And, so both of us were on Raya, and we were not actively pursuing, but we were just kind of leaving.
I was checking all the time.
Yeah. I was in there.
I'm like, I wonder what they think of my profile, and do you think they would believe we're just here for friends? Because we could just be here for friends, but also it'd be cool if it'd be more than friends. I was looking all the time.
Yeah. So
I didn't know that. I love that.
I'm in the weight room, and again, the mystical plays it's a theme, it's a motif in this. And this was where the mystical first steps in. I'm in the middle of a set, and we just worked out today. You saw me, my phone was there. It fell out of my pocket, but that was about the only time I gave it attention. When I'm working out, I'm fucking working out. I've done that for most of my life, right? Like, workout is almost like it's a sanctuary. It's a sacred place for me. So I'm in the middle of my workout, and I just get this message. And the message is, go on Raya right now, and you're going to find somebody there that's important. And I go, huh. Okay. And I've had enough messages from Spirit that I tend to listen, especially if it's low cost. It's interrupting my workout, but that's a low cost. To ignore God at that point to finish your workout would be absurd. So I open it up. First picture pops up. I'm like, nope, that's not it. Click one time, and there's Alana. And I'm like, and I just get this kind of like chills. And I'm like, fuck.
You showed me immediately too.
I was like, fuck. Like, I think this is it. I think this is what Spirit was telling me about. So I sent her this message on the app. And the message is something like, hey, like, this is going to sound super woo-woo. And I totally understand if you think I'm like a crazy person, but I got a message from Spirit and it said I would meet somebody right at this specific time on this app. And so I'm just messaging you, all good either way. I was kind of embarrassed. And then she hits me back real fast and says, woo-woo, that's the place that I live and love. And I was like, damn. So that was the kind of mystical beginning. So I'd love for you, Alana, to take us, people don't know you here yet on the podcast and they don't know your story. So just moving through some of the kind of key points that brought you to that moment, finding yourself in Miami.
Yeah.
In many ways, not even knowing why you're in Miami.
Totally.
At that point. So give us a little bit of your story so we can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, that was really interesting because I think one of the most interesting pieces of that was that I had been on Raya for a day. I had downloaded it the day before. I had never really done like the dating app scenario, but prior to that, I had decided to leave a relationship that I was in for a couple of years. And ultimately, it was one of those relationships that externally was beautiful, but there was just a deeper truth running through me that I knew wasn't in alignment. And so I'm kind of in Miami in this limbo place, just kind of not really knowing what I'm going to do or what's next, and feeling anxious and leaving what I had done for most of my life as a career and feeling that there was something more, but not knowing how that was going to unfold.
Largely a model.
Yeah, modeling mostly. And just feeling like that was completed. I wanted to do something more. And just not really honestly being in kind of a place of being really lost. And I had a friend who was like, just download Raya and just talk to people, because it's so not my pace to online date and just be in that exploration. And so I was like, okay, like I'll do it. And then the next day was when I got your message. So, and also for most of my life, I've like really had the beautiful opportunity of having synchronicity be such a part of what's led me through so many beautiful portals. And so always listening and being willing to lean in. So when I got your message, it was like, great. Like, let's see what's here and like have a fun whatever lunch or whatever it will be, It was exciting.
Yeah. Beautiful. So talk to show Vi, and we see like some Hawaii connections that are there. And we're like, oh, this is awesome, because obviously Vi's Hawaiian and you'd spent a good portion of your life living in Hawaii. So it's like, wow, there's some crossover here. This is going to be cool. So we only had a couple days left in our Miami trip. We'd been largely unsuccessful in our own quest, although we tried to get picked up by a couple swappers at different restaurants and things. And we're like, no, thank you very much, but not interested.
Swingers,
swappers.
I was also moving out of Miami in 2 weeks. This was also an interesting, and my age limit was set to the age up to that you were just turning, essentially. So there was like all of these little pieces.
It had to happen within, at that moment. If it would have waited a month, I would have aged out of her. I would have aged out of her limit. So I'm currently aged out of her limit. Thankfully,
it's a preset limit. It's a preset limit.
It's a moving limit. It was you said it exactly right. So anyways, we're like, hey, let's go grab some lunch. We'll grab some lunch at the Faina at Los Fuegos, good Argentinian steak restaurant. And we go there, and really, I don't even say much during that whole lunch because Vylana and Alana were just hitting it off, talking about special spots in Hawaii.
It's just a different thing when you have somebody that is from Hawaii and like has the aloha spirit and they understand the lingo and the food and all the things. Like I don't get to ever experience that. And that's all my family. And so immediately it was just like, yes, I get to experience this super excited part of me. And we just like, shot off.
Yeah.
So for our second date, we share with Alana that Vylana and I had been developing, what we really believe is a lineage medicine practice that we call the God Bomb. And there's been many people who've come on here and shared their experiences with the God Bomb, from, Layla, who's shared it, to, Shaman Jen and Valko, who's shared it, and many people who've shared it. And we were in the developing of this, and we let you know, we're like, hey, we have this particular type of ceremony. It's quite intense, but it's really safe, and we'll be there with you, to guide you through this process. And you're like, yeah, let's go. And we're like, really?
The second,
for sure?
Wow, she really trusts.
I was like, for sure, really?
Like, we're good and we deserve the trust, but like, you also just met us. I mean, I know we're great, but.
Yeah. So like, good read of character in that, and good discretion. And so you show up for ceremony. It's not a ceremony that you were familiar with. And, the purpose of this isn't to describe that ceremony. There'll be many other chances to do that. But we've been with a lot of people and a lot of people's energy in those ceremonies. It's a place where we merge consciousness in a very kind of fundamental way. And we're on the inside of the inside together. And it's just me and Vi and you on the bodywork table. And the energy that you were putting off while you're in this was so profoundly different than anything that Vi and I had ever experienced. We were like, whoa, like, who is this being?
Yeah, I had like all this shock. First of all, I'm normally doing energy work and, shamanic breath and doing sound and all the things. And I sat there for a lot of it because there wasn't really a whole lot to do. But like my Shakti was so open, and there was this moment. There was this moment where I was just feeling, it's almost like you feel like what it feels to be that person. And there was this part of me that was like, man, I want to be you when I grow up. I was just like, you're so much younger than me, but on a soul level, I kind of want to be like you when I grow up. And it was really beautiful because everything that we shared after that, I remember you having like a, thank God, like almost like somebody can really see me. And there's so many more details we don't have to get into, but it was like almost like my experience of that the afterglow of that process was like a kind of at home feeling of feeling like really deeply seen in a way that almost felt like you've been looking for.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. It's like, it was interesting because up until that point, and I think also what I wanted to mention in here was that it's just to distinguish, like, I've had so many opportunities to really forge what truth feels like in my body. And I feel like that's what a lot of my life leading up to this period was preparing me for. And so, like, in meeting you, yes, there was like the newness and having gotten out of a relationship, but there was like a deep coursing. I could feel the truth just running through both of you. And that was like really where the permission and the openness to step into whatever you were offering, I could just feel that there was a quality of truth. And also in the listening, like there was something for me here. And yeah, coming out of that ceremony, first of all, going into it, I hadn't ever really experienced, I had some experiences with medicine, but nothing like on this level. And I just remember dropping in and being like, oh, this is a real, like, this is like, I just remember kind of being like, oh, this is real. And like, no fear, but just like, okay, like, wow. And yeah, it was this deep sense of like feeling so seen in a way that I don't even think I fully knew I was looking for. Maybe I had abandoned being possible because there is somewhat of nuance, and I had been around people who could see me, but just to be on that level of the inside and feel such safety and feel so honored in like the naked truth of my being was so, so, so profound. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something two things to pick up here that are so beautiful. I'm thinking about Neo and Trinity. We always have to go back to the Matrix. And when Neo and Trinity first meet, they don't meet in the kind of classical romantic way. Trinity whispers in Neo's ear, we've been asking the same question. Right? And, Alana just said so beautifully, and Vi, you're pointing to it, and Aubrey, you're pointing to it. You said, it's not just that I was open because I had just broken up from a previous relationship. It's like, this was the truth I was questing for. And there was a recognition because all three of you had been and were on and are on the same currency, the same journey. And so there's this very deep recognition. And sometimes, Neo meets one Trinity and sometimes he meets two, right? It goes the way it goes.
We've all been asking the same questions.
Right? Or you meet Trinity and then Trinity's friend in a different context, right? Which is, right, more of a, but we've all been asking the same question. That's one. And the second thing is, Aubrey, you've referred to it, and Vi, you've alluded to it in many conversations, and Alana, you alluded to it, which was listening into the signs. And it's very easy to kind of dismiss that as is that a New Age thing? Well, that's not a New Age thing, right? And I think anyone who knows me well knows that in terms of intellectual integrity, New Age is a little bit anathema to me. But there's actually this deep sense of the intimate universe. And the intimate universe whispers. The mystics, the interior scientists call it, the erotic mystics, remise de oraita, the glimmerings of she, the glimmerings of light. And of course you can over-listen and think that tarot deck told you to sell your house, probably not a good idea. But there's a discernment. There's a discernment. We can discern, we can listen deeply. And we're all in this intimate meshwork where there's direct personal address. We're all personally addressed, and cultivating the capacity to listen to those unique, intimate whispers is a very big deal. And all three of you, and I want to just say this because it's a really big deal, all three of you have said thousands of no's. And that's really important for people to understand, right? In other words, I think two things are important. One, you've said thousands of no's. So you guys are very big on no. Right? You say very few yeses. So that's a big deal. There's 10,000 no's that allow for any yes. And two is, and this is a strange thing to say, but let's say a strange thing, the three of you would be at this table if you were poor. And that's a really important thing to say. This is not, oh, wow, we've got some dispensable time, a little extra income, we're kind of in Miami. No. In other words, and we've been through these depths. If you guys were like, for whatever reason, wow, right? The whole world turned around and we were poor, God forbid, right? Because everyone should be filled with plenty and we should take care and there should be no poor people on earth, right? But if you were, you would still be in this constellation. And that's deep. So there was a deep searching. There was a deep integrity. There was a deep listening to the intimate universe. And there's not a bone in my body that's not proud of that.
Yeah,
so yay.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So away we go.
So thus begins our pre-tragic stage of this constellation. And I remember, Vi, you sang so unbelievably beautiful because you had your crystal bowls out and you sang as part of our God Bomb ceremony. That's one of the things you offer. I offer the body work. I have apprenticed with Parangi. You offer and some words, and you offer your song and also your magical practices. But there's always the sound healing that's at some point in that. And you sang with so much force and precision and things unlocked in your voice in such a way that you were like, oh my God, like I want Alana everywhere.
To be there for
all
of them.
When whenever I'm
Gotta
singing.
be in the field while I'm singing. This will be good for everyone.
So Alana starts journeying along with us where we go. And anytime Vi has a performance or something like that, Alana's there, like helping with the bowls and offering her presence, and Vi's stepping into new octaves and levels of your own capacity, partly because of this shared field. So that was beautiful. And then we started tiptoeing into the erotic intimacy. And I kind of embarrassingly tiptoeing, actually moving real slow, so slow that we laugh at it now. It was just like, we had, I think, so much just respect for your purity, in that way that we couldn't quite see yet the primal actually aspect that you had, where your roots and your leaves both stretch down. But we tiptoe into that, and that's beautiful, and that's exciting. And so we've spent quite a bit of a stretch in that period of the pre-tragic. We're like, this is fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, as with all stories, the pre-tragic moves into the tragic. And you've heard us talk about this on many podcasts. But, Marc, if you want to actually, I'll turn it over to you rather than, since you're the source that's transmitted this teaching, talk about just briefly, and I know we could spend the whole podcast on pre-tragic, tragic, post-tragic. We're going to use this model to kind of explain some of the other elements of the story. So just quickly.
Let's totally do that. The pre-tragic, tragic, and the post-tragic is just so crazy helpful to understand life. So the pre-tragic, as we've all done deep dives in, the pre-tragic is clarity. You're ecstatic. It's clear. Let's say in the realm of love, which is one of like 60 examples of the pre-tragic, but in the vector of love, I'm madly in love. Love conquers all. My beloved is filled with pristine purity and grace. They're obviously without blemish. Right? Love is quite beautiful and blind, and there's a radical clarity. Everything is clear. It's pre-tragic. And it's important to know that it's clarity. So even it can also be theologically, right? I'm a fundamentalist. Pre-tragic, it's all clear. Even if bad things happen, I know exactly why. There's no mystery. Pre-tragic is clear. And then at some point, we always hit the tragic. So in the realm of love, we're like, we fall out of love, or it's complicated, or it's painful, or it's not the way I thought it would be, or it's not clear, or I'm confused, right? There's clashes, there's holy and broken hallelujahs, right? That's the tragic. And that's station 1 is pre-tragic, station 2, oh my God, tragic. And most people, when they hit the tragic, as we know, it's tragic. Let's get back to the pre-tragic. So we get to station 1 to station 2. Station 2, that's a little complicated. Let's get back to station 1. And most people spend their lives in a station 1, station 2 dance step. But as we've said, there's a third station, the post-tragic. And the post-tragic is, oh my God, I'm not bypassing the tragic. We're working through it. We're staying in. We're saying, this is where we're going to stay and do the work. And then we get to a place that y'all are beginning to experience, and then I'll pass it back to you all, but just we'll leave it with the poet. The post-tragic, the poet says, when such as I cast out remorse, so great a sweetness fills my breast. We can dance and we can sing. We're blessed by everything, and everything we look upon is blessed. The post-tragic. Mm-hmm. So that's a beautiful context for this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we're going to go to a moment where the tragic hit like a lightning bolt. The tragic really, it wasn't a creeping tragic.
Yeah.
It was tragic that hit like a lightning bolt. So in this general frame of Alana makes both of us better. We love her being around. She's just such lovely company, always helpful, very present, listening, to all of us, supporting us. And she just has a natural way and an ease about her energy that made it just a lovely addition to any adventure that we were on. So we were going to take an adventure to Egypt, taking a boat up the Nile. And we go to our first stop on this. And in this first stop, it's the Temple of Isis. And beautiful temple. And I'm just kind of cruising around, and we're all cruising around. Wow, like this is powerful. This is beautiful. And then we enter this one dark chamber. And I'm in there in the dark chamber.
It was the Holy Polies.
The Holy of Holies, like the sanctum sanctorum of this temple. And Matthias is there, and he's doing an activation in there, and we're in the dark, and Alana and Vi are in there. And I receive a message as clear as any message I've ever received. And it felt to me coming through the voice of Isis. She didn't announce herself, but that was implicit in my understanding, in this almost telekinetic understanding. And it says, you need to have children with both of them. And I go, excuse me? Like, what? And then the voice repeated itself. And I go, what? Like, I was just like, my heart sank into my belly, and I was like, fuck. So I quietly exit the Holy of Holies and find some place where I could look out at the water and just go like, what the fuck was that? Because I knew that that was not the covenant that I had made with Vi that brought her in. That was not when I got down on my knee and proposed. That was not part of the plan. And so now I was in this tragic place of complexity where I had just received what I felt like was a clarified voice, although I'm always suspicious of any God voice that comes in. And that's another important topic of conversation. You can't take these as face value. Also, a child could mean a book. It could mean a tarot deck. It could mean a variety of different things. It could be a birthing of something else. So I'm going through all of these possibilities, trying to figure it out. But I'm deeply troubled, deeply troubled. And Vi is deeply attuned to me. So, you know, we kind of make it through the Isis temple, and we're back on the boat. And, you know, we're lying in bed together, and Vi asks me, like, hey, what happened? What happened in the temple there? And she'd asked me before. I was like, I don't feel like I want to talk about it. And I was trying to avoid it. But she just point blank, she's like, what happened? What happened there in the dark? And I take a deep breath and I tell her what happened. And that was just such a deeply, you know, painful moment for you to receive that.
Mm-hmm. It's felt like, at first when you shared that with me, I felt pretty calm and collected and was able to like hold it from a place. But the more that our conversation continued, you know, like it was bringing up that piece of me that feels like, you know, like I always get like hit out of left field just like as soon as I feel safe. Like there's something else. And so it was a lot of that woundedness around like, this always fucking happens. And like, I've been so open in the blessing and trusting. And then like the thing that I literally was the most afraid of. And this is like, you know, I had a little bit of hesitancy about this podcast just because it's exposing the, you know, the most vulnerable part of my journey. And, you know, we had a really difficult day, as you can imagine. And, you know, once we kind of, both of us are very dramatic, so we went like full out. I have a little thing on my ring, but I like tried to like pull off my ring and I couldn't pull it off. And then that just,
Hate when that happens. You're trying to get the ring off in a dramatic way.
Yeah, I mean, it was
doesn't work.
Full drama.
I almost threw myself
He
in the
wanted to
Nile.
throw himself in the Nile. Like,
It was dramatic.
people next door, I'm just like, Jesus Christ.
That was me.
Yeah.
But, you know, kind of coming down from like the big energy, like I feel like there's so many dimensions of myself. There's like my wounded self, the part of my imprinting and programming and fear and everything that I've been through in my life that's like one dimension of me. But I also have a really deep access to seeing above that. And so a lot of times, you know, especially throughout this relationship, it feels like this tear between the two of like me trying to bridge them together. But when I could lift myself out of my own personal fears and ego and all of the things, like there was a part of me that was reflecting that could see the beauty of that. And I expressed at that time, I don't know if I could ever choose that. I don't know. Like I can see it, and I can totally hold that as a possibility, but I am so not there to be moving towards that reality of, just still all the things that we were working through in our relationship. And so, I was sort of like holding the whole landscape, and then simultaneously feeling like my love for you, like you're not just a person. You're not just this like random exploration of like, bodies that pair well together by like rubbing genitals. Like you're not just like a person, like you're you.
Thank you for that description.
Yeah. It's not, it's not just a bit, it is about that and it's not about that, it's like
it's all about sex and it's not about sex at all.
Totally. So,
right?
So yeah, just in that moment was really like, and at the same time, we're in Egypt. I'm having like the most like supernatural experiences of my life. And then this just felt like it felt like my whole world was like falling before me in front of my eyes. And there was, and I'm just trying to like hold it together to make it through the rest of the trip with like every new temple that we're going through. But, luckily at that point, was able to see beyond just my woundedness, but a real clarity that like, I don't know that I could ever choose that. And I'm not going to try to figure that out right now. But ultimately we shared that with Alana, which, our relationship is so much about just radical truth. Like I definitely in my comfortability could have just like held that and not shared that, because that would feel for sure more safe. But, our relationship, there's just such a flow of truth and we all feel each other so much. It's impossible to hold anything. And, you had a very interesting reflection when we shared that too.
Yeah. I was actually just tracking the same thing and was going to thank you for thinking back to that moment of like coming and sharing it with me and just feeling how easy it would be to not or to let it sit. And it was also surprising to me in a lot of ways. And it was also very much probably the first like extremely mystical moment of this path, because within the previous month to that trip, I had 2 experiences with friends who, for me, are people who I like really honor their channel and like what they see in their reflection. And they didn't know that we were kind of dancing in any kind of like romantic context. I hadn't shared that with them yet. And both of them had shared that they had some kind of vision of me and Aubrey having children. And at that time, I kind of dismissed them because, in my mind, one, that was not a possibility. And I was tracking how, like my brain could see you as like, the divine masculine in this example. And so it wanted to, make this context. And so I hadn't really tracked those super clearly. And then when you brought this to me, it was kind of the moment of being like, okay, like maybe there's something here that's tied to my destiny, and also sharing in the, well, how does this even work? Like, what does this mean? Not being like, oh yeah, perfect, we'll just figure it out. I've been very blessed to have really great relationships with most of the sisters in my life, always been very much what you would call a girl's girl. And like our relationship as well, like would never want to hurt you or like, bring, bypass, or like, I want you to be in your happiness, and seeing how that had the potential to do that. And so in that moment, I think we all just kind of shared this, like, what do we do with this, while also acknowledging that there was something that was coming to meet us.
Yeah, and I think we made a intentional choice to kind of bracket this mystical experience and temporarily regress back into our pre-tragic let's just try to keep things back to where they were.
And that's a good moment, right? I remember in this moment, I remember where I was sitting, and Aubrey, you left a long message from Egypt, and I looked at it and said, that's a really long message. Like, what's that about? So I listened to the whole message, and, I turned to KK, Christina, my wife, and I said, they're in trouble. And I said, I thought this was going to be easy. We were just studying. I said, this is going to be a long year. But everyone was so deeply authentic and graceful and pained and broken, and there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. And Aubrey, what you just mentioned there in passing, and what we're all pointing to was this thing of bracketing. So I want to get this bracketing thing, in play. A genuine person who's on a quest knows when to bracket. And bracketing means, I don't know what to do with that. It's radically irresponsible to act on. I can't close down and just pretend it didn't happen. So what I do is I bracket it, and I step back into my life, and then we see, is it going to be persistent? Is it going to come calling again? Or will it recede? Was it a moment? And there's a great maturity and depth. Trustable people know how to bracket. Right? It's not an impulsive move. This wasn't an impulsive leap into the abyss. It was like, whoa, we listened and we bracketed, and then the journey begins. But now we're trying to go back to the pre-tragic, but once the tragic has disclosed itself, and the tragic is not horror, the tragic is lack of clarity. Right? Pre-tragic is clear. The tragic is, where should we go? What should we do? And the depth in which you, Vi, were able to sit in the question. Mm-hmm. The depth, Alana, that you were able to sit in the question. The depth, Aubrey, that you were able to sit in the question. Bracket, let's re-enter life and keep listening.
Yeah. And I think that, as you said, once the tragic has disclosed itself, despite the fact that we bracketed it and tried to move back, there was a fundamental lack of safety that had touched you, because there was that question mark that was there that could not be, you can't erase it from the memory. I always think it's hilarious when judges tell the jurors to strike that from their records, as if we have a,
you can bracket, you can't delete.
Yeah, you can't
There's no delete button.
Delete things from the mind. And so the normal encounters that we would have became more difficult and became more challenging, of course, in that process. And more things started to come to the surface in the relationship. And I don't think it's worthwhile to belabor all of the different little points, but I will share that, as a psychonaut, I'm kind of a wild guy. I push the edges, I push the boundaries. And occasionally, every psychonaut knows that there's boundaries that need to be kept and there's boundaries that need to be broken. And sometimes the discernment about which of these boundaries should be kept and which ones should be broken is not always perfectly clear. So I've made mistakes along the way. And it was actually a mistake that I made where I went into a journey that was far deeper than I anticipated it was going to be, which left me in a really shitty situation where I couldn't actually go support Vi for one of her, sound checks for a big performance that she had. I was just unable to leave. I was like, and so Vi was like, okay, I got to go, and this is, and then I was like, but I was not in any place to be by myself because the depth of the medicine journey was such. And Alana and Vylana and I were used to navigating this medicine space. So it was like, Alana, all right, stay here with Aub, make sure he's okay. And in that moment, there was this kind of, I'm like, kind of cross-eyed from the medicine journey, but there was another point that actually pointed to that, man, there's something deeper there in this dyad, in the love that's, kind of blossoming between Alana and I, that was also there was an isness to it. And it was like, fuck, because we were trying to go back to this pre-tragic, but then this other thing happens and it's like, I don't know if the pre-tragic's available anymore. And that kicked off the exploration of, okay, maybe we can't go backwards. Now, what does it look like to go forwards? And that's been a long and bumpy path. And one of the reasons why we haven't shared this is because the path has been arduous and bumpy, and we've been in our own chrysalis of understanding what this looks like, how it could be. And we've had glimpses of the post-tragic. I remember we were having dinner in Kauai, drinking heaven sake, and it was like a glimpse of what the post-tragic, we got just a taste. The goddess like gave us just a taste, and it was like, wow. But then the tragic was still there and strong. And, you know, all of us have made countless choices throughout this process to stay in and figure out, because there was something there that was us and beyond us. And we've always come back to that. And now it lands us where we are, which is in, you know, this kind of much more stable post-tragic. And I don't have the hubris to say that the tragic, you know, the chimera that comes from the tragic won't rear its head, of course. However, we've navigated those challenges in our odyssey many times and have landed to a place of real comfort and stability that points to a stable structure that is one avenue of, you know, as your latest book, The Evolution of Love, points to, not necessarily in the structural form, but the idea that there are many possibilities. And if you stay with truth and with love and with honesty and with grace and compassion and compersion, and you really care for each other, there's possibilities that can develop. And I think that's where we find ourselves now. But I'd love to, you know, open up, you know, to both of you, you know, anything that feels really important in each of your journeys during this process that you'd like to share, and obviously any reflections from you is, and then ultimately getting to our model, and then what that means for the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think you know, there's so much about this whole thing that has been a really familiar path. I guess I'll give a little bit of context to where I want to go. So I am the older sister. I have a younger sister that was born when I was 2.5. And as you could imagine, you know, like I'm a very big-willed kind of human. And I loved my mother so much that when my sister was born, I've had this come up in a lot of medicine journeys. You know, it's like I couldn't understand at that age, when my brain was still developing, how all of the love and particularly attention, it's not really about the love, it's the attention that is placed, then transferred to this little crying thing.
All about attention. It's
the attention. And, you know, and I loved my parents so much, and, you know, I know that they did their absolute best, and I've had a lot of things with sisterhood in my life, because I ultimately made my sister my enemy, and we hated each other until we were in our 20s. And so I kind of came into life having this sort of conflict with the feminine, particularly in relation to attention being placed, love, time, all of those types of things. And so, you know, as everything progressed into, you know, this isn't just about an experience that we're having together, you know, which was the place of comfort that I, you know, found in our exploration. But now there is a desire for there to be their own intimacy where I'm not there, which was another really huge death for me, and coming up to a really, you know, big place of my fear, which ultimately, you know, ensued into like a breaking point in our relationship of like, can we make it through this? Like, I mean, I think that's important to note, is like it reached a total breaking point where we actually spent 3 months apart to just sort of, come back into our own energy to try to find the clarification with your support. And all of us during that time were suffering, like you're knowing that this was something, so deep and true and sticking in while we're trying to figure it out. I mean, it's beyond complex. And there were so many moments during that time too, where it's like, I could feel this like wounded sister, are you trying to take something from me? Are you trying to take my place? Or, like all of those things that can arise. Like, I mean, I went through so many waves of all of that over and over and over again. And one thing that I've learned through our relationship is when I like really lean into the love, instead of isolating and making you other, but I lean into our relationship, it feels the best in my system. I feel so much more at home, and I feel like it's been healing the parts of me from my younger self that has needed that love and sisterhood and care. And so there's been such a big piece of the deepening of our relationship as like a really big driver to the unfolding. But in the total, I mean, you've been there for all of it, the messiness of just all of the intricacies and wounds and fears and desires and all of the things. And I'll say for myself, like there was a part of me for a time that was really angry about, being in this blessing and opening and then everything unfolding in the way that it did. I've had to process a lot of really, really deep stuff. But then, we moved to a place where we came back together in our breaking, like the ultimate crisis of like, can we even stay together in our relationship? Like, how do we do this? Neither of us know if we can, like he was so like really clear in his truth and desire, which at this point of me sitting here right now in this seat, I'm so grateful for you trusting that. At that time, I could not see what was ahead, but I think that there's something to say for like the trust if a desire is clarified, and if it's love, it's true. This isn't just like a satiation of some kind of emptiness. Like our relationship is so rich and full. It's not like there's anything lacking for either of us. But I think that there's something to say about like trusting what feels true and trusting in the love. And for me, I can say sitting in this seat, like it has been the greatest liberator for me. Of everything that I've always been afraid of everything that I've been trying to control so that I could feel more safety, of, all the wounds that I've had with the feminine. It's like, no, lean in more, love more, be open more, soften more. And like every single time that I've done that, they've just been these little baby steps of helping me to find my way through. And yeah, I'm really grateful to you. I would love to say, obviously, very publicly, and Aubrey has said this so many times, like when we're in conflict, you're there for both of us. Like you're such a stand for our relationship. You have shown over and over and over, like you're not here to take anything from me. Yeah. There's no part of you that doesn't want me to be in this picture because you desire, like there's no conflict in you. You're just such a stand for our relationship. And we don't need to go into all of the stories, but like in our most recent one, like really, really feeling like my sister has my back. And in a way that our shared intimacy, we both know you on the inside so deeply. When I'm struggling with something, and the way that she's able to see me, hold space for me, resonate with me, and just like be there as this like beacon of just love, light, presence, devotion, listening in so many of the ways, like it's because of you. It's not like you're just something, like it's because of you that we're able to sit here right now, and in a big way, like why our relationship could come to its full fruition. And I couldn't always see that. And you've seen me in all sorts of crazy lots of times. Like there's no, you've seen me in the most, both of you have seen me in the most maximum crazy you could possibly imagine, but both of you have held, you know, so much love and patience and honor and just, you know, thank you from the depths of me for like the places in me that have felt so just not entrusted in safety with the feminine, and it's touching me in different places that I've never been able to access, because I have a lot of beautiful friends, and you know, a lot of friends actually that came from, you know, me and the other woman being involved with the same man, and so this is like a pattern in my life, but it's really healed places of me that you almost feel like a guardian of. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the entire process, again, I think having this experience of just knowing what truth feels like in my body, and knowing and that never leaving, you know, within the witnessing of the difficulty, and like feeling both of you so deeply, and my own, you know, struggles of like, am I a disruptor? Is there, you know, like, and never not being clear in my intention, but just also the fear of, will I be received in what the true intention is? Because I could see the ease of assuming, or especially when you have other patterns from the past, like there were so many places where that could have unfolded, and to just feel like I got to witness you continuing leaning in and receiving me truthfully, and like feeling the truth of my intention and choosing to trust the truth of my intention, I think really allowed for us to deepen, and for that truth to stay alive within all of us, and for us to be able to share in that space of the unknown, but know that we were in it together. And obviously not without its challenges and, you know, very scary moments, and like all of our own individual fears. And there's been so many places within all of us, I think, that we've had to die to, or ideas or expectations, and really just knowing that like, oh, we're moving through this together, and this is actually something that is forging like a deeper bond within all of us. And also, you know, just to, for me, I think a tone that's been constant throughout our connection is that, again, like you really seeing me, but also that these natural expressions of my being and just how I be, which isn't always necessarily attuned to in a certain, the capacity that you both do, like seeing my beingness, my presence, my intention, the purity of the intention that I carry, be of service and be like expansive to both of you, has given me such a deep confirmation and such a deep sense of purpose beyond just my small world. And it just feels so incredible to be received, and for that to be so additive to two incredible human beings. Yeah.
I want to just share too that, you know, there's been many Private moments that I've had with Alana where Vylana and I were in some form of conflict, and we're in the tragic, and the tragic, all things are on the table. There's questions. And to understand that from a selfish perspective, right, the idea of us being able to share a bed every night. I mean, you have strong sugar glider energy. Like you really like a good cuddle. Like really do.
I do.
And so all of the selfish desire would be to say like, yeah, maybe it's not going to work with Vi. But for you to have never once taken that road or even hinted at it is like a shocking testament to a purity that is, it's really like transcendent of what I've known in the world. And that purity that is a part of your essential quality I was just talking with Marc about this in the car, is like people who, if you don't have an experience of purity, you don't know what you're fighting for in the world. You know, and and we all have our purity in our different forms. And, you know, Vylana and
we're not. I mean,
we have it in,
we're like
in our different
we're
forms.
like two sides of the same coin, which is like awesome and crazy.
A little bit of good, a little bit of
A
bad.
little bit good, a little bit bad.
But the goodness and purity that you've maintained through this process is like, it's really been absolutely stunning and exceptional and been such a blessing. And it's such a blessing to now be able to share you on this world stage as an archetype, and not to reduce you to a single archetype, but the archetype of purity. You know, and that's like, there's just something so potent about that, which was also an aspect of this that was like, it evokes something that's very important, I think, particularly in the masculine. It's like, in the purity of the world is what evokes the warrior, the protector, the one that says, this world, I'm willing to die for this world. And every movie shows that, you know, the bad guys kill the pure one, whether it's Murrin and Braveheart or whatever. It's like, you done fucked up. There was purity and you took it, and now my life doesn't matter anymore. It's like, what matters is my commitment to the purity of she, ultimately. And it's not just in one person, can't be reduced. It's spread all around, but to have the visceral contact with that purity, you know, it's what causes the sword to gleam resplendent, you know, and for the warrior to smile and say, like, Nakenulawaum, like, I'm ready for whatever's next. It's been a real gift.
Yeah, and really, I mean, it's so beautiful, and really, all three of you have shown purity.
Yeah.
Meaning, you've all been exceedingly complex and a huge pain in the ass.
I don't know if I was about to cry receiving that, because I don't know.
Just to be clear, right? Like everybody, these guys are such a pain in the ass. Just to be clear, but you've all been like wonderfully complex, but also you've all held at different moments the place of purity. So there were times when Alana was holding the purity and the clarity and was the kind of stable arc, and at other times Vi would go down into her deepest place and clarify and find her purity, and it would hold everything. And at other times, Aubrey, right, would find his deepest purity. And, you know, when you have three people, you know, we were talking yesterday, there's like 9 relationships, right? At least, right? There's everybody with themselves, and then with the other person, and then with God. And there's moments where at each moment we turn to one of us to hold it, and then we kind of pass the torch, and then in the end we hold it together.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's one. But the second thing is, I just want to kind of say something just a little bit to kind of, you know, people listening. No one here needs rescuing. Let's just relax, everyone at home.
Yeah, please don't project onto
Right?
me
No
that
one-
I'm not
no one-
choosing this for myself.
No one reads it.
Please.
Right?
It's okay if
Everyone's
you do, but-
made beautiful choices, and that's really important. In other words, we never had a sense in this last journey that this has to work. And there was always a moment where everyone said, okay, let's really go deep. What is our deepest heart's desire? What's our clarified will? And there was an enormous sense of freedom here. And I never viewed, just in kind of my little seat here, I never viewed it as my job to make this work. Not at all. It was to have the maximum integrity in this journey. And if the maximum integrity in this journey means that there's going to be an evolution of love and there's going to be a new configuration of intimacy, then, oh my God, like blessings on high. And if it means something else, then it will mean something else. And we've really followed this deep listening and this deep, deep refusal to bypass. And if you would ask me, which you haven't, but I'm talking, so what the fuck, right? You know, but if you'd ask me, like, what should a person listening, you know, take from this? So there's definitely like lots of guys saying, I want my wife to hear this because, well, bad idea. Okay, that's not the way to go. It's more like, this is a model for radical commitment to purity, to love, and clarity. And that means something utterly different to each person listening. So whether I'm single or whether I'm in a classically beautiful monogamous relationship with all of its holy and broken hallelujahs, whatever my model is, all the split off parts need to be brought into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just want to say something. There are hundreds of millions of people sleeping alone who don't want to be sleeping alone. And so the notion that there's only a particular version of a city on a shining hill, which looks only a particular way with a particular white picket fence, with a particular kind of dog wagging its tail, with particular configurations of children and grandchildren, that's nonsense. Love comes in many distressing and wondrous and gorgeous and complex disguises. We have to love with integrity, and everyone has a right to love. And everyone has a right to be loved. And it's just simply not true that you only have a right to love and be loved if it fits into that model.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't fit into that model, you should be ashamed of yourself, and you don't have a right to love or be loved. You know, as the Bible says, fuck that. Right? That's just not true. It's not true. Right? There's a fundamental right to love and be loved. And so we have to hold what are the highest possibilities. And everyone's got to find their way. Vi, take it away.
Yeah, I think something that feels like it's pressing and wanting
Please.
to come through that I think would be really helpful, that you helped me to really meet within myself, because it's been such a journey of, can I really choose this? Can I really choose this? Because, you know, in a beautiful sound ceremony that we did with Alexandre, I met a part of myself that felt like I could potentially be really happy in just a monogamous relationship where there isn't this shared time and attention and all of these things. And I was sort of overriding that with my will to choose.
Right.
But I actually met that very real part of me. And so I was in this inquiry for a while of, who am I? Am I the woman that abandons myself? And it was torturous because it's so not who I am. And I think it's important to speak into the space of like,
Beautiful.
you know, you can look at it as me, you know, submitting myself to his desire, but I would love for you to speak to
It's beautiful.
the unique sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we've talked on Aubrey, we've talked about this so much, and Alana and Vi, and it's just true for all of us. We all have a unique risk. And my unique risk is not Aubrey's or Alana's or Vi's. And we also have a unique sacrifice. But sacrifice, and I love the distinction that we've made together, we can never abandon ourselves. And all the people are thinking, oh, right, you know, Alana with her background, Marc with his, Aubrey with his, Vi, right? We pathologize.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to mythologize, not pathologize. What's the great myth of my life? And of course, all of my early stories play in. But there's a moment in which, in order to be a hero, to be the hero of my own life, there's a sacrificial act. There's a reciprocity of the sacrificial in all great relationship. And anyone who thinks they can do great relationship without an act of radical sacrifice that's born of love is wrong. It's not possible. Not abandonment. I want to make that distinction.
Yeah.
That discernment. You never abandon yourself. But what is right sacrifice? And just for a moment to be kind of mystics, the infinite intimate, God, sacrifices some of the divine in order to bring the world into being. Just ask Jesus on the cross as the nails are going in, right? There's a sacrificial act that's made in love. So what's the sacrifice that's right sacrifice?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's no teacher who can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no guru who can tell you that. And there's no psychologist who can tell you that, although there can be guides. But in the end, we have this deep trust. Can I trust my deepest heart's desire? And can I clarify that desire? And if I can't clarify it, I shouldn't do it. But that's true whether we're a Southern Baptist couple who have been together for 50 years. There's a sacrifice that needs to be made. And if you don't make that sacrifice, you will wind up living together familiarly, but intimacy, aliveness, surprise and delight will be gone. And once eros collapses, so does ethics.
Mm.
So this is the big deal. This is about ethics. This whole conversation here is about ethics. And I want to just get this last, because this book you pointed to, Aubrey, about the evolution of love. It's based on this very deep premise that we've all talked about so much, that all ethical failures are based on a collapse of eros. I don't feel my aliveness. I don't feel the fullness of presence in my life. I don't feel radically engaged and alive and moved by life anymore. So I feel this deadness, and then I cover up that deadness with what? With pseudo-eros. But pseudo-eros becomes exponentialized war, abuse, destruction,
Addiction.
right? Addiction of every kind. So everyone thinks, oh, right, this is just some, kind of highfalutin, kind of wildly exclusive privilege. No. This is a great journey into what's possible in being fully alive for us particular people in our particular lives, in order for us to live in that full aliveness so we can be radically ethical beings, pouring that aliveness into service.
Mm-hmm.
And every single person watching has a completely different story. But in that story, you have to ask yourself the question, you never abandon yourself, but what are you willing to sacrifice as a great sacrificial act? In Hebrew, the word for intimate and the word for sacrifice are the same word. It's a three-letter root, korban. The sacrificial act and the intimate act are the same. And unless I'm willing to sacrifice, I can't be alive. And if I'm not alive, I ultimately become, to borrow the biblical phrase, an asshole. Mm-hmm. I'm not ethical. Yeah. I can't give. Mm-hmm. So, wow.
There's so much to unpack in understanding the difference between compromise and sacrifice as well.
Yes.
Because without this kind of understanding of sacrifice, where you're laying something with full heart and even a kind of joy to the altar, rather than saying, oh, I got to fucking compromise. Compromise always feels like I had to give up something that I didn't want to give up. Where sacrifice, when it's intended, I'm intending this sacrifice for for something greater than myself. I'm giving my best to the highest, which is, so I'm giving something that is important to me onto the altar for something that's even more important to me. So it's not a compromise, because we could look at this and like, what are the compromises we all had to make? But it's not that. It's really the right question is, what are the sacrifices?
And the unique sacrifices.
And the unique sacrifices that we've all had to make this work, because we believe in something that's higher than these separate self-desires that would be seen as a compromise from the separate self. But looking into the future of our own lives, our own stories, we see, no, that's not a compromise. That's a sacrifice.
Yeah. No, that was a really helpful frame that you gave to me as I was sort of wrestling with this piece of me, because, we spoke after that and we were both in just such a loving place of like you not wanting for me to, abandon that part of me that's real, that's not from woundedness, that's not from my trauma, that's not from all of these things that my mind was trying to orchestrate to help me to understand. But it was just actually a true piece of me that was partial. There's also, the piece of me that the ability to have a connection with somebody, which we can get into that later, but the ability to have a connection with somebody if it's true and having that level of freedom, like that's actually another piece of me that is so absolutely true. And so kind of in that inquiry, what I was really recognizing was like this unique sacrifice for me is not just in devotion to our love or specifically our relationship. This was something when I lied on my back, tortured by this inquiry and asked God, like, what do you want from me? And God said to choose this. So this isn't just my devotion to you. This isn't just my devotion to you. This isn't just my devotion to we. This is actually what I am being guided from God, and it is my devotion to God. And so even though that there is this piece of me that in some imagined place, I've never actually experienced monogamy. So it's just imagined. Like, there's never been one time that I've actually known that. But the interesting thing is there's always going to be sacrifice, because say I made that partial piece of me the whole thing and I left this, I leave the potential of my dharma and everything that we can do in the world and our children and what they can do for the world. It's like it's sacrificing something so much greater. And so I wanted to make that distinction, because this is unique to me. And it's the thing, that you shared, that, sort of in the pre-tragic, it's like, what do I get? In the tragic, it's, what do I give up? And that's going to be the case for everybody.
And in the
it's not
post-tragic, it's, what do I sacrifice in a holy sacrifice?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a, right?
And there's actually, the beauty of it is that love deepens through that sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's the distinction between compromise and sacrifice. Like, our love has grown and deepened through that sacrifice. And we all, everyone has sacrifices. I just, wanted to share that story because it's my own personal experience. But, I can feel for a lot of women watching, who have had discomfort around, something like this, or an expanded context, or their partner having these kinds of feelings. Like, from my own sense of myself, this feels like my unique sacrifice that's in devotion to God.
Yeah, and when I went to that's so beautiful, Vi, and Alana, Aubrey. I was in Oxford, and I was writing there in the Bodleian Library, and outside my window on Friday morning, there would be like 50 Romanian men who would be lining up, who were working in Great Britain, who were sending money back to their families, right? And, whenever I see kind of the demonization of men, I think of those men, kind of working like 17 hours a day. And that was their devotion. That was their sacrifice. And it was gorgeous and it was beautiful. And for those men, that model was their stunning and beautiful model. And I am on my knees in devotion to that beauty. Just like I'm on my knees in devotion to your beauty. There's not one path up the mountain. And I would just ask, just so tenderly, Ab, with Vylana, with Alana, that people give up being threatened as you listen. There's no sense that you should be doing this, or that this is better than anything you're doing, but there is a demand here. There is an invitation, which is whatever your authenticity is, whatever your integrity is, right, on your unique path, for your unique risk, for your unique sacrifice, don't compromise.
To thine own self be true.
Right, really to thine own self be true, and live great love. Most people have given up the possibility they can have great love. And that's not true. And if we don't have great love, if we don't live as outrageous lovers, something wilts inside of us. We're no longer, you described, Alana, so beautifully as you met in this place, how you were, I'm seen, right? I'm recognized, and we're all systematically misrecognized. And then all of a sudden I'm recognized and I'm welcome in the universe, right? So this story for me is another welcome home sign in the universe. Great love is possible.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe last sentence, I can't tell you how many people in the last couple of weeks when I mentioned that I was going to do this podcast, they said, don't do that. That's just too controversial. And of course, I've avoided all controversy in my life. So I certainly wouldn't want to step into, right. But the truth is that I wasn't willing not to do it because I'm proud of you, and I'm proud to be proud of you. Right. I'm proud to be proud of you. Right. Because you're standing and living in great love. And you should be proud of yourselves, divine pride. And y'all said in the last couple of weeks, everyone in their different ways, we would do this no matter what. Right? Rich or poor, in sickness or in health, however the ways of beauty go, we're three souls together, not with radical distinction, a marriage, a lovership, a deep honor. Alana never wants to have a day where she feels my love is less important. Vi never wants to have a day where she feels I'm less married. Right? Radical monogamy in the field of erotic mystics, and Aubrey has got to be awake all the time, and Vi's got to be awake all the time, and Alana's got to be awake all the time, because we have to actually place attention and be surprised and new every day and let the blessing spread.
And the post-tragic garden is it is an arduous path, because it takes you through the tragic. There's no way to get to the post-tragic garden without navigating the tragic. And the tragic is full of the proverbial Scyllas and Charybdises, the rocks and the hard places and the eddies and the whirlpools. And it's a hero's journey to get there. And there's lots of different places where, particularly I'll speak from the masculine perspective, that you can stumble. And you can stumble in your ethics and become the dark sorcerer who's manipulative. And one of those ways is, if you're controlling the resources, you could try to use the control of that resources to not give a true, blessed option. So in the inquiry of whether Vylana wanted to choose, I wanted to make sure that if she didn't choose, I promised I'd love her forever. I'd make sure that she would have, a share in the resources of our kingdom. She would have a beautiful, blessed path, that I wasn't using my resources to control her in any way. And then also, you have to be, if you're in this type of construct, you really, as I said, you have to be willing to put your money where your mouth is, proverbially, in the erotic jealousy arena. Because both Alana and Vylana have had lovers while we're in this construct. And if I folded in that moment, it's not that there aren't difficulties or things. Fortunately, I've had a lot of practice of losing my mind over that jealousy and my own, experience there. So I've been able to be like, I can love you madly. I'm not going to love you less. I'm not going to hold a grievance. And I'm not one of those people that enjoys that idea. I'm not thinking about it like, oh, they're with another lover. That's not erotic for me, but I'm also able to just
it'd be okay if it was, Ob.
I know.
I'm just saying,
but everybody wants to assume. It's the only way. It's the only way they can think that it makes sense.
Right?
People
I
call
got
me
it.
Cuck Norris. Like, I must love this shit. I don't love this shit, but
Right.
I love my partners, and I love the ethics and the value and the truth of actually playing this fair and loving and straight the whole way, because the love is real and the eros is real, and that's inextricable from the ethics. And the ethics are, okay, let's look at this. One of the key things in these constructs is, can you trust that when your partner is with somebody else, that they'll leave the garden that is your partner better than when they found it? And that's really the key. And in that, are they coming back with more vitality, with more energy, with more love to pour back into the relationship? And, fortunately, in our construct, it is that. And in many of the construct, for most of the time in that lovership that you're with, it was that. Vi would come back more alive and be a better version of herself. And then it would be more ecstatic on the reunion, and Alana exploring and figuring things out. And it was exciting. And then ultimately her saying, I don't know necessarily that I'm better from this. And her saying, okay, I'll wait and I'll explore and feel. But I think, for all of those, the men are out there like, oh, Aubrey's got it made and figured out. Like, really, really think. Like, if your sweetheart, your beloved, goes to spend the night with another man and they're having sex and doggy style sex and oral sex, hopefully not any more than that. That's about the limit of what I can take. But nonetheless, could you really be okay with that? Could you really, really champion that? Could you really be a wingman and be like, I want this for you, and also hold the discretion?
I want your pleasure even when it doesn't come through me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's been the big compersion piece. And I want to honor you for, my own exploration with a very unexpected lover that came into my life in very same thing, like very synchronistic ways. We talked about it so much. Like I thought maybe I would have like a tantric teacher or something like that, but I wasn't really like putting my vibes out there to have any kind of lovership. But, really wonderful human, Joshua, came into my life, and like Aubrey was my wingman. Like he had my back. Like he reached out to him and gave his blessing before I even knew, and all of these things unfolded. And what I want to share, about that particular experience was, I've never had that experience for myself. So my imagination of what you receive from this dynamic has always been imagined. But what being in my own, lovership with somebody else and feeling a really profound, deep love and connection and intimacy and the richness, both Joshua and I are very musical. So there's part of like my muse and my soul that would come alive in the time that we would spend together. That's just its own unique essence. It's not in competition or comparison with Aubrey. It's just feeding a different part of my soul that's like generating more aliveness and more depth and more richness. And, I'm really grateful to him for that. And one of the things that it has offered me is a really deep perspective of understanding, wow, I can have this deep, profound relationship with someone where there's so much allurement and desire and, creativity and all of these things. And it doesn't compete with the depth of my relationship that I am so fulfilled by. There's actually this interesting place where it's deepened our relationship. You would think that like things are in competition or in conflict, but it's actually the more alive I've been, the more alive our relationship has been. And so it's really given me that perspective of knowing you from the inside of like, I'm never going to be Alana, and Alana is never going to be me. They're both poets. They love Rumi. I don't understand what the fuck those poems say. Like for the life of me, you can read me a million of them. I don't get it. I wish I did. I just don't. Like my lovership, like I'm so musical and sound is my nature. And I got to really experience like this generative aliveness that somebody outside of our relationship could really, bring to our life. And, it was a really beautiful path. And I'm super grateful for it. And there's just like so much love and honor there and deep respect. But I think in the context of what we're really forging here, there's like this necessity for there to be an all-inness. Like, Alana is all in. Mm-hmm. And then there's also, it's kind of paradoxical because it's like we're so deep, we're so in agreement, we're so committed. And there's also the freedom, like it's like radical commitment and total freedom. That whatever comes, it's like I can actually walk out into the world, and if there's some synchronicity and I feel a connection with somebody, it's not that I'm going to like act on it in that moment. Like we have to be in agreement that feels, right for our relationship. But like the freedom to know that I can trust in whatever is true for me. Like that's ultimate freedom in the context of monogamy, in the context of radical commitment, which is like, it feels like total paradox. But something that I just wanted to touch on because it's been so helpful for me to see through your eyes, and it wasn't something that I was looking for, but it was the perfect thing that really met what I needed. And it also offered me so many deeper places of healing things within myself that are just different from our dynamic. So it's like, it's not in competition. It's actually really generative. And I think that's the key. Like it has to be generative. Yeah. If it's I don't want to like reduce it, but if it's sort of like taking energy and there isn't like the full we-ness in the field, like that's where it can get a little bit complicated.
Real intimacy is always creative.
Yeah.
It's always creative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alana, you got some thoughts there? What's stirring in that mind heart of yours? Anything you're thinking?
I think that one piece in that was just you having that experience helped us deepen so much because it wasn't that there was an unwillingness to see me or see my position in this constellation, but I think that allowed you to see me on such a deeper level, and also my unique sacrifices. And not that it was exactly the same, but I think that was really like a key moment of opening for us to really just feel and deepen in our intimacy and understanding of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think, for Alana, the depth of love, there's no ceiling on the depth of love. There's structural uniqueness in our relationship, but there's maximum freedom, and then there's the constraint of the love that it's just natural. It's a natural law. It's not a contractual law. It's just the natural law of how much love there is, that we won't violate that love with another thing unless it is genuinely additive to the love that's already there. Or hypothetically, it could be a different, greater love that could cause a sacrifice, but none of us feel that even in the slightest. It's like, okay, whatever's going to work, whichever other players come into this, field that we're in, this field of erotic mystics, whatever they are, they have to be generative to the whole. They have to really work in a way that works and synergizes and makes all of us greater.
And is like additive.
Yeah.
It's like adding, it's almost like a soup, you know? You want to add the right flavors.
It's worth saying that most people, most of the time, are struggling to make ends meet. So they're like, I've got about 6 minutes today to work on my relationship. And that's actually tragic. That's not a good thing. Right? That's not the vision. The vision of returning to Eden is that people can actually be in the dance of love, that we can be creative in love. And you've decided to be erotic mystics. And to be an erotic mystic means that part of my great experiment in life is that I want to, for the sake of all, actually try and generate new configurations of intimacy, and then to vulnerably share about them and to experience the holy and broken hallelujahs to see what's possible. And not everyone should be a physicist, and not everyone should be a chemist, right? And not everyone has that possibility. But what we do want to do is we want to also recognize, and I want to just kind of feel this for a second, that as people listen, just you have to feel into your own life. What in your own life, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, what does this evoke in you? You don't want to imitate this. Bad idea. Bad idea, right? You want to see what creativity does this evoke in me. So for example, if I'm with my partner, what are the split off parts of me that I can't bring to the table? Well, now we got 3 people again. It was just me and you, but there's the split off part. What's the split off part of you that I haven't allowed to come to the table? So this is about, you want to watch this podcast as a movie. It's a late night French foreign film, right? About this wild cast of characters, someplace, somewhere.
If only you could see into all the drama.
Right. And
Make a good film.
And it hasn't been
My
cheap
drama.
grace, right? No cheap grace, but it's got to evoke something in you, which is, what's your journey of love? Love is gorgeous and love's hard. It takes everything, full commitment, full fierceness, full tenderness. And so the invitation, I think, and correct me, but that you're issuing together as erotic mystics is not be like us. We certainly don't have any sense that we're doing anything better than you, not in the slightest. More like, if we can share who we are in some way which provokes your own journey, your own story, your own love story, and your love story somehow deepens because you're called into that depth. And by seeing this podcast, you're just not willing to settle, right? You don't want to leave your context. You want to deepen your context. You want to take not the wrong risk. Don't be foolish. Take the unique risk. And for most people, again, and I apologize insincerely, but I want to say it again. For most people, most of the time, that's usually with 2 people. That's the right path for most people most of the time. but it's definitely not the right path for all people all of the time.
Mm.
And I would rather not have hundreds of millions of people going to sleep alone at night who are desperate, right, to create some depth of intimacy. So let love dance and let new configurations arise, and let every person's right to love and be loved, to desire and be desired, fill them with eros so we can be filled with ethos.
Mhm.
And we can create a good world which no one's left out of the circle of intimacy.
Mhm.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Alana, I'd love to hear from your
Yeah.
perspective, because there will be a lot of people, and Vi and I have shared from our perspective. I shared from the masculine perspective certain things, traps that you could fall in. Vi's shared traps that she could fall in the competitiveness. The world, there is a kind of intensity. This is challenging that we have this, and it's almost like people are afraid that this unique configuration is going to be contagious. Like we got to quarantine people from this construct so that it's not contagious and nobody gets any wild ideas. But from your perspective, coming into this relationship as it was, like, what are the things that you've learned, and what are some of the traps that you see, and speak to other people, because there will be hundreds, if not thousands, who've found themselves in a similar position to you. And like, I know you have some, beautiful thoughts about a king and a false king, and different ways that which you can actually align your devotion if you are in your position. Now, of course, you can only speak from your own uniqueness, but also just for anyone who's positionally similar. It's not going to be the same, because you're uniquely you, and it's uniquely Vi, and it's uniquely me, but positionally similar. What guidance would you give that you've kind of learned in this process? Because I'm sure it wasn't what you imagined,
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of coming into this has, again, forged my capacity and my faith in the unknown, because there have been so many things that you just weren't able to see through. And again, going back to that felt sense and that gnosis of trust and truth in my system has really been the guiding light. And I can speak a bit to like the unique sacrifices. I think that that's something that a lot of people would imagine into or come across if they were in my position. And, I think there's a constant evolution of like different things that we all meet. And some of, one of the things for me is the way that I love and love to be loved is like very full on and very intimately and kind of consistently. And obviously within our constellation, there's different availability. And so, one of the specific challenges that came up for me was, going to sleep most nights by myself, and just like these pieces of desiring for these moments of life that, attribute to a certain level of intimacy that you do have in more of a normal partnered context. And I think that I've seen all of these things as provision, and really approaching things from what is this here for me, and not, I think there's like a basis of having to consistently feel that truth, not abandoning, and really recognizing. And I can really resonate with your experience of that questioning as well. It's like getting really clear as if am I abandoning something that I truly want and desire and that is like true for me, or is this bringing me to a threshold where there is more possibility? And with these like different pieces, I think I've just consistently been brought to a place where I've witnessed that whatever is available or what's available is really like a deepening for me with God, like those moments where there is spaciousness and I am alone. How can I not see it as lack, but I can see it as like, okay, what is this mystical third thing that is here for me? What is waiting for me? Why is this a provision? What's offered in this moment? And I think that there's such a gift of our love is that it is so full and so rich. And so there isn't actually like the feeling of lack. It's just getting it's in deepening into what the deeper levels of some of these expectations that you have in relationship, or these ideas of what relationship will look like and feel like. And one thing that I recently like moved through and observed was like a big piece for me was the feeling of being witnessed, just in like the small day-to-day moments and things like that. But again, it's a unique sacrifice, because it's like, well, I actually feel the most witnessed and the most seen in the context of this relationship. And so it's not saying that those feelings aren't not there, aren't true, but it's like there's something deeper for me there, you know? And also, yeah, I mean, I think that there's the reason that this is so true is because like you are a good man and like you are a good woman. And like the speaking to the false king and the true king that you mentioned, like as my teacher Kelsey shares, it's, you know, the false king perpetuates distortion. And so if I was feeding into, you know, this relationship and I could track that there was true distortion, you know, resulting from either one of our individual relationships, like it would be a sign that there is something not true. But that's never happened. It's always been an initiation into more love and more truth, and also just more possibility. Like how much can you be willing to be uncomfortable to allow possibility and the potential? And then moving through that and being like, wow, it actually feels so good and it's so much more liberating, you know, to my being than what I think my ideas of what love or relationship look like. And also, again, like our shared mission, like you both have been so supportive and helpful and like celebratory of my unique being, and helped to bring me into a place where I can see that as something of service, and just given me permission to be who I am and to see that that can be a service. And I think that that's another quality of relationship, that like in a true exchange of dynamic, you'll always feel like more empowered and more encouraged to be who you are at the core without changing what is true.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, this is not prescriptive. And I can also hypothesize an evolution of consciousness, a new story, you know, in a new level of consciousness, where even if just seasonally, you know, there are younger men or younger women that encounter a couple that have great life experience and great wisdom and great, you know, great opportunities and great growth that's available, and entertaining these dynamics, these triads. Some, you know, would be seasonal, some may last in eternity, you know, but there's so much taboo around this subject, and people play around with it and they stretch edges a little bit, but I can see a world where this is far more normalized, and that there's actually places and conversations that people can have. And I think that's another one of the challenges. It's just hard. You know, I imagine there's probably, you know, I don't know, Reddit groups where people are talking about this and gathering together to talk, but there's not real, it's so rare actually that people are really talking about it to really understand, okay, what are the sacrifices? What are the benefits? What are the traps? What are the things to look out for? You know, and I think that's I think what I hope and what my desire in sharing anything that I ever share, whether it's a psychonautic journey, what are the virtues and benefits? What are the traps? What are the perils? What are the costs? What is the preparation? What is the integration? What does all of this look like? What is the communication technology? What does all this look like? And I think that's, you know, something else that can drive this and does drive this forward for us, is just saying, okay, we're here in this place open sourcing our technology, and it's not recommending it, but it's open sourcing it, and whatever you can learn from it, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been so helpful
to have some other kind of model of like,
Right.
this is how it works. These are the traps. These are, just like anything to be in the exploration of feeling
Yeah.
a little bit more like there's a little bit of a map when I meet this, that has a little bit of structure and ethos and agreement. With this, we were just, other than with you, like we're just figuring it out as we go, like step by step. Every single step is just this totally mysterious horizon of like, okay, now we're here. All right, now what do we do here? And how do we make it through here? And how do we love more here? And so, yeah, I guess for me, again, so not prescriptive. This has been the hardest and most radically beautiful and majestic, path that I've ever walked. And it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there's so much depth that can be seen through any lens of whatever kind of relationship constellation where it could be serving.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's beautiful. I mean, it's funny. The job of the teacher is almost never to tell people what to do. If a teacher starts telling you what to do, leave. Right? In other words, we never give up our own autonomy, ever. But what we do need to do is to actually live inside a story of value. Live inside a story of Eros value. And, Aubrey, we were talking about, earlier, and we've talked about in other contexts, I remember a moment when it was 2016, and Hillary Clinton was debating Donald Trump, right? It's a moment in, kind of world. There are about 80 million people watching. I was at Terry Nelson's house in Mill Valley, kind of watching the debate. And then Donald Trump has brought Melania. That was clearly not going all that well. There were lots of other things kind of in the news about that. So there's kind of that happening. Then Anthony Weiner and Huma Abedin are there. Then there's all this press about Huma and Hillary, because that's what's going on. Anthony's sexting other people. That's a problem. So that couple wasn't doing that well, right? Bill and Hillary, let's not even go there, right? That was not going that well, right? And Trump has brought a whole bunch of women who have sued Bill. And then you look at the scene and, you say to yourself, what do children think watching this, right? These are the leaders of the Western free world. And all of it is acted out pathology, hidden, manipulated, used, hijacked, commodified, right, in the lowest level of political power games. So, something's wrong with this story. And just to pretend that that's not true is to look away. And so what we tried to do, and you have that over there, we tried to do in this book, right, which it's called The Evolution of Love. And it's called The Evolution of Love from Quarks to Culture, is tell the story of the evolution of love. And in this book, there's actually an attempt to try and talk about the history of the world as the history of relationships. And we do the third essay is like a deep reading of science. Reality is relationships. The second essay, levels of relationship. The first essay, how the meta-crisis, existential risk, is because our relationships are alienated from the whole. Our relationships are breaking down. So we try and write. So we try to, and we've all been in this together. And as I was writing this constellation, of course, emerged, because that's what happens. I'm writing, and then we're going through this kind of story together. And of course, we all realize that this is a story about the evolution of love. And your commitment has always been, how do we participate in the evolution of love?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Does this configuration of intimacy evolve love? And it's funny, we call new configurations of intimacy, we can't recognize them, so we call them in evolutionary theory mutations. Mutation. But mutation means a mutant. Something aberrant happened. That's not what a mutation is in biology. Mutation means there's a new configuration of intimacy that actually has an ability to give more life. And so therefore, the system of life chooses that configuration because it gives more aliveness into the world. And so this is a story, which is a love story, right? The story that's been told today is a love story. And sex is a love story, right? Sex is love in the body at its best. And sex is always at the altar, right? There's always sacrifice. There's always a sacrificial act. And we've tried to share here today a great love story so that we can all be called to live great love stories. I mean, and what a holy and broken and beautiful moment to be in together.
Yeah. And, I think that we're coming to a time where the workarounds to make the old story work. I remember reading Bertrand Russell, and he's complicated, but also brilliant. And he said, prostitutes are the safeguard of the home. I remember that phrase very particularly.
Right.
Right. And that was just the way it was in his time, where actually, you have your committed monogamous relationship and then you go to the bordello and, you have your sexual experience, but it's the safeguard of the home because it prevents some other form of adultery, I suppose, was his reasoning. And we even look at a hero that many of us hold as a hero, who I believe was probably the greatest president, that I've been aware of, JFK. We all know he was sleeping with Marilyn, and Jackie was lovely, and we love her too. But somehow we've just made that exception, and kind of normalized, but actually it's fucked up in some way,
Yeah.
So all of these workarounds, it's time for, instead of the workarounds that make a system not work, and my advice to people who are in the realm of infidelity is I don't come to them with judgment. I understand the crisis and the challenge that they're dealing with. I just ask, is that the only option? Are you sure? And that's it. That's all I'll say is is there a way? Is there a way that this could be in the full light of truth and evolve into something more? And I don't press it beyond that. I'm not trying to be the moral judge here. And there'll be lots of people who are judging me and judging us and calling this some unholy coupling and all this, pressure and that'll come in. But fundamentally, ultimately, it's just a question are you sure? Is there a way that you can live in full integrity and full love and that you can max out your categories? And also to say, for me in my unique configuration of desire, I know that in this unique configuration that we have, I will be happy to the day that I die.
Amen.
I know that. I just know that to be true. And it doesn't mean that I couldn't have fun in some other situation, but I'm
Different
fundamentally, I can rest and know no matter what else is going on in the world, I will be happy to the day that I die as long as we're happy. And I'll fight as hard as I can to protect it so it's not the hungry ghost constant need for novelty to generate some form of eros that only lasts for a fleeting moment, like the burst of a firefly or the breath of a buffalo in the cold plains that just evaporates into nothingness. No, this is growing and it's getting stronger and sturdier and more alive and actually separating each one of each of our individual relationships, separating more and more from the field so that everything else is that sounds complicated and, only it's not even interesting. And so for me, I've found this interesting place in me that I can just really rest and know that I can live a life of full integrity and full love.
It's
and
gorgeous,
what a blessing.
Right?
What
gorgeous,
a fucking
right?
blessing.
And here's a vision of a redeemed world, and we have scripture on this, right? Right? A redeemed world is where everyone in the world has the possibility to go through, if they choose it, this journey, Aubrey, Vylana, Alana, that you've gone through. In other words, the possibility of being in the field of eros isn't limited to a small group of people. That the hundreds of millions of men in China that can't find a bride, right? That the man without a job that no one will look at, right? That we begin to look at each other with different eyes. We begin to create new configurations, new possibilities that made this be a spark, right, to actually flame love in the world and all of her creative possibilities, because no one who doesn't want to should be going to sleep alone, right? Reality is about intimate communion, and it's about the utter joy and fullness of loving each other madly, intimately, deeply, and closely. And it's not good, says the scripture, for the human being to be lonely.
Mhm.
So let's move beyond loneliness and actually come together in this wild cacophony of intimate communions, of which you have all lit a flame and issued a challenge.
Amen.
Amen.
And add sugar gliders and Savannah cats to
Our
fill
familiars.
to fill in the gap.
Damn.
I'd love to just offer one final closing sentiment from you, Vi, and you, Alana, and Alana. This is thank you for being willing to jump into the public eye here with us and share that. And there's so much depth of wisdom that you have to share, but to both of you to offer anything to the listener directly, some piece from your own heart, related or unrelated, but anything that's moving through in the listening of something to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I've said it so many times, but it really has been the pillar throughout my life. And then watching it, be such a guiding light in this experience is like, really, it is so worth it to forge and attune what truth feels like in your body and to you, and to create a relationship with truth and with faith, so that each time you're met with something that feels like it might be testing it, you just know that you can lean into that place. Because for me in my life journey, it has never brought me to anywhere but the most liberated, beautiful, beyond what I could possibly imagine. If I had 1,000,000 minutes or 1,000,000 hours to think that this would be where I would have been guided to, from just listening to the whispers and trusting the whispers and not submitting to the fears that can feel so real and can be so validated, in the external world or in our own mind sometimes, to just really, it's so worth it, and it's so beautiful, and it's something that I think, can only cultivate more beauty and more alignment with whatever your destiny is.
Do you have any, and I know we're at we're wrapping this up, and so I don't want to open up, huge new rabbit holes, but, one thing that we've talked about extensively is anthro-ontology, the ability to actually know what is real in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And often the mind will seduce us into a lot of different things, and we'll feel something, and the mind will quickly create a bunch of scaffolding to justify a story, to explain the feeling and make it make sense. What's some guidance that you have for how do you feel this truth in your body? Like, your cognition is distributed in some of the most balanced ways, from your mind all the way to your bare feet, which are always walking on the sand and rocks in Kauai. I mean, we took a 9-hour hike and she didn't put her shoes on
Barefoot.
once. It's fucking crazy. So I think that has something to do with it. But what is it? How does somebody feel? How do you feel the truth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's unique for everybody, but in my experience, there is a deep quality of resonance and ease and clarity. And I think that, there's thinking into it, it's so somatic, and it's almost, in my experience, so quick. It's almost the first thing that I feel or know. And then I can track, moving into the fear or moving into places of distortion where that starts to come in afterwards. But if you can attune, and honestly, a big piece of it for me has been presence. Like, if I can be present enough to feel that first gnosis, and it's just a practice of feeling gnosis in your body, and I think it will be different for everyone. And honestly, I've practiced it so much that I don't even know if there's a particular formula for me, but there's a familiarity to that. And I can feel, anxiety or worry or contraction or competition. Like so many of the qualities of the smaller self that we've talked to here tend to be products of something that is not true. And I think also truth, in its nature can be disruptive, but it's important to recognize, what is it disrupting? Is it disrupting something that's trying to keep you small or trying to continue a story of comfort, or is it disrupting something to liberate you into something greater?
Yeah.
And just really using presence and stillness and spaciousness to attune to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like even, let's say Marc and I, we're not skilled musicians, but if, Derek over there was playing a guitar that was out of tune, something in us would be like, I think that instrument's out of tune. There's a vibrational frequency that's when it lands on my body, I just feel like it's not quite in tune. And I think we're beautiful instruments that are tuned to the frequency and harmony of truth. And if we can actually remember ourselves and be in the truth of ourselves and hone that instrument, I think it can be, as it has been for you, an incredible guide, and it has been for us as well, the ability to, detect that. Now, of course, Vylana and I have, we have a lot of energy that moves up between the ears, it can get in the way, and we all do, but I think it's an important lesson to feel truth with the wholeness of your body. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
Vi, any final words?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind. I feel like, particularly from reading this book from Martin Prechtel called The Smell of Rain on Dust, he talks about the importance of grieving. And, I think that importance, for me, there's been so many different cycles of our relationships where there have been big deaths of the life that I imagined for myself, or, what my small self would deem as comfortable. And I've really given the space to grieve those parts of myself. And in one of the more recent ones, with that part that I made contact with, of the part of me that imagines that I could be happy in a just total monogamous relationship, through my unique sacrifice, I grieved that part of me because it deserved that love and honor, really. And in that process, I just hugged myself, and what was coming through was like, I know this isn't what you wanted, but it's what you need. And I think that that's one thing that I'd really love to leave with people, just, maybe being in the exploration of life isn't ever going to turn out always the way that you want, but there's an element of it that can be exactly what you need. And I think for my own becoming and liberation from my small self's comfortability, that ultimately wasn't driving me. It was driving me towards comfort, as you said. It wasn't driving me towards this total liberated possibility of so much more beauty and so much more intimacy, that I really, just really wanted to share that piece. And then the other one that's been really helpful for me is in relation to the small self is who's in the driver's seat of my consciousness? Who is it that I am serving? Is it my small self's desire for the comfort and the perceived safety that I could get by trying to control or contract or all of these things? Or am I actually allowing for my soul and my higher self to be in the driver's seat of my consciousness? And I've been really deeply in devotion to that. And there's this beautiful thing that can happen when you can elevate yourself out of the separate self, that it's just everything is here. This is my trauma. These are all the things that I know. This is what I think I need, it's so defined. But when I lift myself out of that and really inquire into what am I being of service to? And for me, this relationship, and softening and dying over and over and over again, I can feel the part that feels like it's in service to just something that is greater than me. I'm part of it, and I'm an active player within it that is willing it and choosing it and devoting to it, but it also feels like it is something greater than me, that when I look up at God and I ask our son, what do I choose? And it's so clear, and there's no part of me that can be in conflict with that, because that's this divine relationship that all of the other details and things, like, they work themselves out as long as you're authentic, as long as you're telling the truth, as long as you show up for the difficult conversations, no matter what they may look like. Like, this relationship is so important to have because it has helped me to overcome all of the places where I was too afraid to get over myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Rebbe?
Wow, huh? Right?
Yeah.
Right? And maybe our last word. And Ab, you'll close it. Is if this was just a personal exploration of three people trying to maximize their psychological breadth, it'd be okay, but somewhat boring. Sorry. But all three of you are madly devoted to being in service. All three of you are madly devoted to showing up in the world and participating in this evolution of love. And so what you've been looking for, if I can, and what we've been trying to clarify is, what is the configuration of intimacy that makes me most ethical, most in integrity, most alive, most devoted, most feeling of the whole, most committed, right, to creating a world in which there are no more lonely people, in which every man, woman, and child, right, actually has a seat at the table. And you've been doing it, and we've been doing it not just for today, but to heal all of the yesterdays and for the trillions of unborn children, which actually won't be born if we can't actually participate in the evolution of love. So this is the context of this whole conversation isn't actually merely personal fulfillment, looking at each other's eyes. It's been looking at a shared horizon, and then from that place coming back and looking at each other's eyes, and what kind of intimacy and wholeness and communion can we create that will radically enliven us to be in mad devotion, right, to the whole world. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think there's an affirmation that comes from our brother Paul Selig. And the affirmation is, I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. I am here. I am here. I am here. And I have come as love. I am love.
Yeah.
And there's deep, deep, deep wisdom in that. And if you know the answer to those questions, you feel them deep. And that you know that you're love in motion. You're evolving love. And you really trust that about yourself. Then you open yourself to the mystery of, what does love want from me today? And that's service to God. Like when you ask that.
Here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. Thank you so much. I love you all individually and collectively, exponentially, maximally, infinitely, to the ends of time.
Everyone, hands in the air.
Yeah.
Make this real holy. This moment is holy.
We love you guys, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.